Welcome back to another episode of Gods or Regret. Today Shaw will talk about the mastery of things, how you can become a master at anything, and how we believe the lies about mastery. Shaw is a lover of fine cigars, vintage jeans, and has a vast taste palette. His life experience along with his workload over the years has led him to share his knowledge with you. Hope you enjoy this podcast. The lies we tell ourselves about mastery.
Welcome back to another Gods of Regret podcast. Hopefully you had a great week, and in this episode we will talk about mastery. So sit back, relax, turn the volume up, and enjoy.
Mastery through experimentation. Look, if you want to level up fast, stop doing the same easy stuff over and over. Your brain actually gets bored with repetitive drills. It only really switches into high-speed download mode when you throw it a curveball or a challenge you haven't seen before. There's this thing researchers call desirable difficulty. Basically, it means that when you're struggling and feel like you're failing, that's actually when the magic is happening. That frustration is literally the sound of your brain building new wiring to handle the task. That's why the real pros don't just stay in their comfort zone. They're always playing at the very edge of what they can actually do. They don't just grind through boring reps, they treat every practice like a mini lab experiment, constantly testing new ways to get better. Here's what that looks like. Forget about becoming a pro like it's some final trophy you win at the end of a game. It doesn't work like that. Instead, start running tiny experiments on yourself to see what actually sticks. Think of it like testing out new settings in a game. You're just checking the boundaries of what you actually know. For example, if you're a coder, try a dark mode challenge for a few days. Write your code without alt-tabbing to ChatGPT or Stack Overflow. See what your brain actually remembers when you can't just copy and paste. If you're into music, spend 10 minutes just on scales before you even think about playing a real song and do it for 2 weeks straight. These little side quests are how you find out where you're actually strong and where you're just faking it. It helps you get comfortable with that weird in-between phase where you're learning but haven't totally mastered it yet. Stop just doing things and hoping you'll get better. You need to build feedback loops. Think of these like the stats page in a video game that actually shows you where your XP is going. You need a system that shouts, hey, this part is working, but that part sucks. Here are a few ways to set that up for communication. If you're trying to sound smarter, keep a mental note of which new vocab words you actually used in a real convo, not just the ones you read. For creative stuff, take progress pics of your work at different stages. When you look back, you'll see patterns in your mistakes or breakthroughs that you totally missed while you were in the zone. For work, after a 1-1 with your boss, don't just walk away. Ask one specific question like, what's one thing I did this week that I should do more of? These loops catch the small, glitchy parts of your game that are easy to ignore day to day, letting you fix them before they become bad habits. Look, when things get tough, don't get pissed off, get curious. Masters don't see a brick wall as a reason to quit. They see it as a puzzle they need to crack. When you hit a level that feels impossible, stop and ask yourself, okay, what exactly is making this so hard? Is it one specific move? Do you need a different angle? What happens if you stop trying to beat the whole thing at once and just focus on one tiny piece of the problem? Real mastery isn't about reaching some final boss and being done. It's to become the kind of person who can handle anything. You want to get so comfortable with trying, failing, and experimenting that you can drop into any new situation, a new job, a new hobby, a new city, and know exactly how to adapt and grow. The goal isn't to get to the end. It's to become the person who can always find a way through. The mastery of manipulation, relative versus absolute risk. If you don't understand this one trick, you will be easily manipulated. It's been used by governments, big corporations, and the media to control public thought and behavior. This is how people use numbers that are technically true to make things sound way scarier or way safer than they actually are. Absolute risk versus relative risk. Absolute risk is the real-world chance of something happening. Imagine a jar with 10,000 white jelly beans and only one red one. Your chance of picking that red bean is 1 in 10,000. That is the absolute risk. Relative risk compares two tiny numbers to make one of them sound massive. If there is another jar with 2 red jelly beans, a manipulator will say, "You have a 100% higher chance of picking a red bean in this jar." Technically, your chance went from 1 in 10,000 to 2 in 10,000. Both are tiny numbers, but because the chance doubled, they use 100% to freak you out. Relative risk is the favorite tool of fear-mongers because it makes a microscopic number sound huge. Absolute risk shows the real-world odds, how it plays out in real life. Food safety. You've seen the headline. You are 500 times more likely to get sick from raw milk than pasteurized milk. That is a relative risk number. While technically true, the absolute risk of getting sick from raw milk is about 1 in 10,000. That's less than 1/100th of 1%. The vaccine pivot. They pulled the same move with the COVID-19 vaccines. Remember the headlines claiming the Pfizer vaccine was 95% effective. That was the relative risk reduction. When you dig into the actual trial data, the absolute risk reduction, the real difference between the vaccinated and unvaccinated groups, was only about 0.8%. That's less than 1%. They could have said, "This shot lowers your actual risk by less than 1%, but they didn't. They went with 95% because it sounds life-changing. It wasn't technically a lie, but it was incredibly misleading. The takeaway, whether it's food safety or medicine, statistics can be technically true, but still used to trick you. Next time you hear a scary or amazing number in a headline, ask, are they talking about relative or absolute risk? Relative risk sells headlines. Absolute risk tells the truth. How to use this for your sales and consulting. You can actually use these psychological triggers to benefit your own business. Use absolute terms to define the value of your services, but use the scarcity principle to handle your consulting intake. For example, when people call me for consulting help, I don't just say yes. I say I am actually fully booked until the end of the month. However, if this is a priority and you really need me, I can make a few phone calls to see if I can rearrange my schedule to accommodate you. This positions you as a high-value asset, someone whose presence is a privilege, not a given. Thank you for listening to Gods of Regret. Please subscribe for more content like this.
The myth of an African god called Allah. His regret. A master of nothing, Allah stands as a god who possessed the spark of every talent but lacked the focus for mastery. The curse of potential. Allah was born with the ability to shape mountains, whisper to the winds, and command the rivers. Yet because he could do everything passably well, he never committed to the deep work required to master a single craft. The moment of realization. He watched lesser deities, the gods of iron, the gods of harvest, become indispensable to humanity because they chose one domain and perfected it. Allah found himself a generalist in a world that increasingly rewarded the specialist. The burden of almost. His regret wasn't that he was incompetent. It was that he was almost great at everything. In the business world of the gods, he lacked a unique selling proposition. He could build a house, but it would leak. He could write a law, but it had loopholes. The final wisdom, Aller's regret, serves as a warning to the modern entrepreneur. He eventually realized that mastery is not a destination, but a choice of what to sacrifice. By trying to hold every tool, he mastered none, and his legacy became the god of regret, the one who reminds us that to be everything to everyone is to be nothing to yourself. Thank you for listening to Gods of Regret podcast. Please subscribe for more content like this.